Hello, welcome everyone. Happy Chanukah to everyone. So today we want to speak about the festival of Chanukah, a new angle, maybe which we haven't spoken about before. But we've also got some unfortunate current events as well, which happened recently in Australia. We had a terrible massacre, many people, Jewish people, at a Chanukah celebration. Australia is the first country in the world to bring in Chanukah because of the dateline starts. You got the center of the world, and basically the country which has nightfall first is Australia, and it happened right at the beginning. So God seems to be telling us something when we enter Chanukah. Is He trying to give us some sort of message, and maybe we can take some. If we understand the idea of Chanukah, how can we contextualize this terrible event? Right, sympathies to obviously anyone who's been affected directly by it. It must be a horrible tragedy. It's hard to think about even. Maybe we'll see there's maybe at the end we'll see maybe there's a silver lining to all of this. Maybe give us a new perspective of how to look at Chanukah. Okay, so going into the ideas of Chanukah, we've spoken about many ideas in previous years. We see that Chanukah gives us the vibes of a dark festival. On one hand, it's the darkest time of the year. It's midwinter, or beginning of winter is at the winter solstice, right? The commandment we have, or the mitzvah, the rituals we have of Chanukah are solely designated for the night time, which is the lighting of the Chanukah candles, the menorah, right? But it seems to me we're connected with nighttime. It's a night-themed festival, whereas many other festivals are focused more on the daytime. For example, Purim, the main mitzvahs, the main commandments, if you want to call it that, are by daytime. Sukkot, right? We take the 4 species, the lulav and the 4 species, we take that by daytime, etc. We blow the shofar and Rosh Hashanah by daytime, right? But see, Chanukah, it's different, it's by nighttime. There's a connection between darkness and Chanukah, but on the other hand, paradoxically, as everything in Judaism, people who know my channel well, you could probably work out the whole lecture right now if they're really thinking ahead. On the other hand, it's a festival of lights. It's the Chanukah candle. It's the only festival where the theme of the whole festival is lights, right? You got the shofar, the sukkah. It's all positive ideas. In the other festivals, right? On Pesach, it's positive because we're remembering the going out of Egypt. Shavuos, remembering the giving of the Torah. But light itself, we don't see as an intrinsic connection with any festival, as far as I can think. So Chanukah, on one hand, it's a festival of darkness. The backdrop is darkness, but it's a festival of light as well at the same time. Something paradoxical going on here. We have a prayer which we say on the grace after meals, in benching, and in the tefillah, in the three prayers we say every day. It's called the Hanisim prayer. Hanisim, we're commemorating, we're thanking God, Hanisim, on the miracles of Purkan, on the salvation, right? Milchomos, and on the wars which you did to our fathers this time of the year, many years ago. And we carry on. We say B'mei Matzio ben Yochanan, the time of the Matisyo, he was the head of the Chashmonaim. It's a band of basically you had the whole Seleucid branch of the Greek Empire, right, headed by Antiochus. They were in charge of the land of Israel as part of the Greek Empire at that point, and they started making gezeros, decrees against the Jewish people keeping the mitzvahs, commandments. And after some time, as a long time this was going on for, eventually you have a man called Matisyahu, and he had a few sons, and together they started a rebellion, and they drove out the Greeks from the land of Israel. Incredible, because we talk about at some point it was only a handful of people. It's just a few hundred people in total in the original revolt, and they managed to miraculously defeat the massive Greek army. That's why we say Masata Gibeon Be'at Chaloshim, you handed over mighty warriors into the hands of weak people, because these were Torah scholars. They were sitting down studying the whole day. These weren't soldiers, right? Rabbi Be'ad Ma'atim, the many in the hands of the few, Tumeim Be'at Harim, impure in the hands of the pure, Rishon Be'at Tzadikim, Zedim Be'at Esecho, right? And then it carries on. Okay. Right, you made a great salvation and a great salvation for them. You redeemed the Jewish people. And now, after this whole story happened, they finally defeated the Greeks. They came into the temple, right? The temple had been defiled. In fact, I think that the Greeks actually offered up sacrifices to, I think, some of the Greek gods, disgustingly enough, right? Literal avodah zarah, idolatry, they performed in the temple. It's hard to imagine such a thing, such a holy in the temple as sacrifices. Right, and they cleared out the temple. They cleaned it up, and they sanctified it. They ritually purified it, and they lit the candles in the courtyard of your holy place. Right, it's referring to the menorah, the miracle of the menorah. As we know, the miracle, there's two miracles which happened on Chanukah, which we'll speak just in a second, right? The miracle of the lighting of the menorah, which is why we commemorate it with the lighting of our menorahs. And they fixed and instituted these 8 days as a festival, a Jewish festival. In order to thank, we're going to see what thanking is in this lecture quite deeply, and to praise the Shimcha for your great name. So, question is, if we look at the sequence of things which happened after the destruction of the Greek army, they came into the temple, they purified it, they made it ready to use, so to speak, right? And they lit the Chanukah candles, which we're going to speak about in a minute, and they instituted for generations a Yom Tov, a festival, a new festival, right? It's interesting because if you juxtapose this with another festival, which we say the same prayer, the Hanisim, we thank God for the miracles. That's Purim. Purim, it speaks about, right, on the 13th day, the evil Haman plotted to destroy the whole Jewish people, from man to child, right, everyone, right, and then you say that, and then how did it go? And basically you annulled his plans, his plot, you turned them on his head, right? Everything Haman was trying to do, you actually ended up doing to him, and ended up with the destruction of Haman and his children, what were hung on the very gallows which Haman planned for Mordechai, and as his plan to destroy the leaders of the Jewish people. That's what happened to him instead. He got destroyed. Doesn't mention anything about thanking God that he made or telling us a piece of information, piece of trivia. Oh, and they made a festival. Yeah, because everyone knows it's a festival of Purim, right? You don't really need to mention that. That's not part of the miracles which happened at the time of Purim. So, but you can ask the same question here. In Chanukah, seemingly the fact that they instituted the festivals is a given. It's got nothing to do with the miracles themselves. Yeah, it happened historically, yes. After the miracles, so you got all the miracles, fine. They cleaned out the temple, and obviously they made the festival because we're celebrating the festival now. Why do you have to mention that in the same prayer where we're focusing on just thanking God? Why are we thanking? It seems to be we're thanking God for the fact that we made the festival in the first place. That's the key here. Very interesting. We're going to see about that. And we know what were the two miracles we had. We just explained in the whole Hanisim prayer there that the Jewish people were victorious against all odds. We had a tiny band of Torah scholars, right? Not warriors. I guess most of the soldiers, the fighting men were, maybe they were impressed with them. Many of them became Misyavnim, they became the Hellenists, so just left with a few old men, and people are just studying the whole day. That's a miracle. Yeah, people are untrained completely, just scholars destroy a massive army. The Greek army, which was the world power at that time, just after the time of Alexander the Great. But then there was another miracle. The miracle was that after the victory, which finished on the 24th of Kislev, right? Chanukah starts on the 25th. They wanted to start the temple service again, and part of the temple service is every night they light the menorah, the candelabra with 7 branches, right? Different from our menorahs, which have 9 branches, right? But we only have 9 branches because it's got 8 branches for the 8 days of Chanukah, plus an extra one, which is the candle which you're meant to light everything else from. Right, but really, we celebrate Chanukah for 8 days, so we've got 8 candelabra, whereas in the temple they only had 7. Right, so they're meant to light that every day towards evening. It's meant to last the whole night, and you had to pour a certain amount of oil. They used olive oil as the fuel, and it had to be pure. It had to be made in a certain way, and they say, okay, let's get on with it. Let's purify the temple. Let's go on with it. Let's get on with the daily service. It's nighttime. Let's get on with lighting the menorah. They couldn't find any oil. They found 1 jar of oil somewhere. I think it was hidden. It was out of the way. The Greeks didn't see it, so they weren't aware of it. So they didn't defile it. It had the seal of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, on it to show that the seal hadn't been broken. That means anything inside was still the pure oil. It was kosher, basically, for the lighting the candles. They took the oil. There's different opinions exactly how it worked, but let's assume this opinion that they poured in the whole oil, and it was only enough to burn for 1 day. But yet, at the end of the day, there was still plenty of oil in it. Right, so they used it for the second night as well, the third night, fourth night, fifth night, right? And miraculously, the oil lasted for 8 days, right? So that's a miracle of the oil. That's why we celebrate 8 days, because we've got a miracle. Some people say, why do you celebrate the first night? There's a whole discussion, many different opinions why we celebrate the first night, because it's not a miracle, because it would have burnt the whole night anyway. Right, it's the second night which is miraculous because it should have run out after the first day. So they say the fact that they found it in the first place was a miracle, or maybe they only poured a small amount in each day, something like that. Or when they poured it in from the jug, they found the jug still had oil in it, even though it was only enough for 1 day. Miraculously, the oil kept sort of refilling. Right, like the famous. Anyone knows my great uncle Baba Sali, Rabbi Yisrael Abba Chatzera, used to do this miracle quite often. He used to take drinks, and even though there was hardly any left, he used to be able to pour for many people. Right, miraculously, it's an even more impressive story. He was traveling across the desert in a car, and they were running out of petrol. He said, "Don't worry about it." And because of his Kabbalistic, he's a very holy person, that small amount of fuel lasted the whole journey. Again, so you have this idea. We have the same idea in the book of Kings, I think. Yeah, the story of the Shunamis, right? Yeah, I think it was Elisha, the Navi, the prophet Elisha, did a similar thing with the jugs of oil, right, to help a poor family there. I gave them the jugs of oil. Hey, just keep bringing to me. I'll keep pouring for you. Sell it, and then you'll pay off your debts, etc. So you have this idea. It's based on the idea of anything which is hidden from the eye blessing is found in it. Blessing means increase, right? So as long as you're not looking, then things naturally multiply and increase. That's the idea in principle. Only holy people can do it, because maybe, I don't know, because I can't do it. So so that could be one explanation why the miracle was for all 8 days, right? Because even on the first day, the oil itself replenished itself. Anyway, either way, we see there was a miracle that the oil lasted for 8 days, and we commemorate that by the 8 days of Chanukah, and we commemorate it by lighting candles every day. Okay, so we ask the question, why mention the instituting of the festival in the actual prayer of Hanisim, right? Right, and that's and the miracles, the festival is really instituted based on the lighting of the menorah, the fact that the menorah was lit for 8 days like that. So God's telling us something. He was telling the Jewish people of that time, I've done a miracle for you. It wasn't just random that you managed to defeat the Greek army. You've done something significant here. And this is something I want you to make a festival out of. Right? And he told them that by the fact that he let this miracle happen, or he made this miracle happen. Okay. We know that one of the central themes of Chanukah is thanking. We thank God for the miracles, right? In fact, the blessing which we include, the Hanisim prayer, which is the one we just spoke about, is included in the bracha of Hodah, the bracha of thanks, in the Shemoneh Esrei. Every day, 3 times a day, we do a whole set of blessings, of 19 blessings. One of them is thanking God for all the nice things He does for us. And within that blessing, we make an addition of this long prayer here, right, on Chanukah and Purim. As we said at the end of that prayer itself, and they instituted the 8 days of Chanukah. That was our question, right? In order to thank and to praise to your great name. So you see, thanking is something intrinsically connected with Chanukah, but it goes more than that, right? We know that who was the opposition to the Jewish people? The Greeks. If we look in the book of Daniel, in chapter 2 and chapter 10 as well, you see these references there. If you want exact quotes, I'll look them up for you I'll put them in the comments if you want, but if you go through chapter 2 and chapter 10, you'll see these ideas. Daniel had a vision in chapter 10, I think verse 5, something like that, of an image of a person, a man-like figure, and he saw that his arms and legs were made out of bronze, right? Out of nechoshes, copper. And it says, and my glory, my splendor turned on me to be destroyed. That means he had something called hoid, which is glory or splendor. And when he saw these bronze arms, right, that affected Daniel in some way. It kind of destroyed him. It was something which is antagonistic to Daniel, whatever that means. So in chapter 2, we see the idea of bronze in reference to Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, he couldn't remember it. I think Daniel had to actually tell him what the dream and the explanation was. Right? It was of a man, and he had a head made out of one material, then the body of another material, then legs made out of the legs were made out of copper, if I remember correctly, right? And Rashi says that these, and it represents, that you've got one kingdom, the Babylonian kingdom, then that will be taken over by another kingdom, represented by the torso or the arms, that's Persia, and then that will be taken over by yet another kingdom, the Greeks conquered the Persians, right? I'm sure everyone knows that, it's a famous historical event, right? And the Greeks defeating the mighty Persian Empire, Alexander the Great, right? Out of nowhere, suddenly Greece just burst forth and conquered most of the known world very, very fast. Just a matter of a few years. And then the Greeks were conquered by the Romans, represented by the feet of the man of the statue. But you see the legs of the statue, which represent the Greeks, were made out of copper, nechoshes, right? So, what's the idea here? Why is Greece compared to bronze? And why does seeing the bronze take away Daniel's Hoid? Very interesting, because Hoid is the same word as Hodov, which means thanks. Remember, if Chanukah is all about thanks, and then you have the bronze or the copper of the Greeks destroying the Hoid of Daniel, you see there's a fight going on there. There's an antagonistic relationship between bronze and thanks. That's what we're going to go into a bit today. Right. And there's one final question, right? Is why is this called an exile? We refer to the four exiles. The Babylonian exile, that's referring to the Jewish people being thrown out of the land, the destruction of the first temple at the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, like we mentioned in the dream of in Daniel there. Then you have the Persian exile, where the Jewish people were outside the land of Israel still. They're still waiting to come back in to build the second temple. And they weren't able to because they were stuck in Persia mainly, right? And they had the whole plot to destroy the Jewish people. That's the Purim story with Haman, right? That's in the middle of the Persian exile, right? So again, they were in exile. I understand why that's called an exile. The fourth of the four exiles, that's the Roman exile. The Romans destroyed the second temple in the year 70 CE, and they were thrown out of the land then, right? So that's an exile as well. But the Greek exile happened within the Second Temple period. The Second Temple had already been built, let's say 40 years earlier, maybe even longer, right? And the exile lasted 180 years. So it's bang in the middle of the time period of the era of the Second Temple. In fact, there's another 200 years after the defeating of the Greeks that the Second Temple stood. So why are we calling it an exile at all? When the Jewish people weren't thrown out of the land. There was definitely a major problem. The Greeks stopped the Jewish people practicing the Torah. Yeah, fine. That's a serious problem. Why call it an exile though? That means you've been thrown out of the Holy Land. I assume that's how most people would understand it. So let's try understanding this. So let's look at the word Hoid. We spoke about Hodo'o, thanking. We know that God expresses his connection with the world and his communication with the world and lets us perceive him through certain attributes. These are called the Sephiros, or the Midos. Right? One of them is kindness, one of them is justice, one of them is mercy. There's another two which are actually lower down, which are called Netzach and Hoid. Netzach means victory or domination. Hoid means subjugation. Right? Hoid also means thanking. Right? That's the Sephira which we're talking about. So we know that the different Sephiros correspond to different festivals. The three primary ones, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, kindness, justice, and beauty or mercy. There's different ways to explain the third one there. Right, we spoke about it recently in our lecture about, I think on the going through the book of Genesis lecture, one of them we spoke about that at length. Yeah, the one about the angels, what are angels, that lecture. So those correspond to the three biblical festivals of Pesach, Passover, Shavuos, and Sukkot. That's Passover when we went out of Egypt, Shavuos Pentecost when we received the Torah, and Sukkot is the tabernacles which we have the early autumn to remember how God protected us in the desert. He gave us huts, the clouds of glory, so we sit in the Sukkah. Then there's another two festivals which are not biblical, they're rabbinical. The rabbis instituted them. That's Purim, to commemorate the victory over Haman, who wanted to destroy the Jewish people, and we end up destroying him. Right? In fact, that's why we say in the Hanisim prayer we mentioned earlier, that he and his children got hung on the very gallows which they were plotting to use against the Jewish people, specifically Mordechai, the leader of the Jewish people. And then you have Hod corresponds to Chanukah. That's what the Arizal says. Yitzchak Luria, one of the greatest Kabbalists, the father of modern Kabbalah, you could call him as well. He says that Matisyahu and his children, right, that was the leader of the rebellion, and his children, right, they rectified the mid of Hod. There was something, because of the Greek exile, it damaged one of God's channels of his light into this world. Which channel are we talking about? We're talking about the one about Hod, so that's what we're going to focus on in this lecture. There's something gone wrong with Hod. And we're going to see many aspects of this come out. What Matisyahu and his children did is they unblocked that blockage. They let the light flow through that. And now we experience God's Hod now, which we'll see what that means. Okay? Also, going back to the book of Vayishlach, we should have already done this in our Torah lecture, but it's going a bit slower than I planned. In chapter 33, I think, chapter 33? I think it's chapter 32 or 33. I think it's the end of chapter 32, actually. We speak about Jacob wrestling with the angel of Esau, right? They fight with each other until dawn, and the angel saw that he wasn't able to conquer Jacob. So what he did is he touched him on his loins. That means his the basic meaning means his legs, basically, and he dislocated his legs, the sciatic nerve, and he was limping after that. So Jacob was affected in his legs, basically, right? Now we know that the Sephiros, the way that these divine emanations are structured, they're structured in groups of three. You've got three higher ones, three middle ones, and three lower ones. And that parallels the way that the human is structured. We've got the head, we've got the torso, and then we've got the lower part of the body. The head's made up of three primary parts: the right brain, left brain, and then you've got the base of the spinal cord, right? At the back of the head, also you've got the central point on the front as well, right? Then you've got the middle part of the body, which is the right arm, left arm, and the torso. Then you've got the lower part of the body, which is the last set of three, which is the right leg, left leg, and the genital area, the reproductive organ, right? So when we're speaking about damaging, or the Greeks damaged the mid of Hod, it's another way of saying it caused a limitation or a blockage of the light, the divine flow, which should come out from that Sephira called Hod, which corresponds to the legs. So if you imagine that God's above the world, he creates this sort of structure through which he can shine his light down to the lower worlds through different lenses in order to limit the light so it doesn't blind us. You can imagine it like that, right? And each one of these lenses has certain characteristics. So they're conceptual light, right? It's not physical light which will blind you. It's the idea of God revealing himself to us, that he's kind, he's just, he is merciful, right? That's what those lenses do, right? Instead of being different colors, they're different characteristics. right? So we perceive God having all these characteristics. The characteristic of Hoid, which is the leg, which corresponds to the leg, is damaged. In fact, it's the Netzach and the Hoid, both legs. So the rectification that Arizal says of the damage done to Jacob, so when the angel attacks Jacob at his legs, that's basically saying the angel representing the forces of darkness in the world, the forces which stop the divine flow, and Jacob's the one who is actually trying to be that conduit to bring down the divine flow of God into the world. So when you're attacking the legs of Jacob, you're effectively causing a ripple effect to, so to speak, God's legs. Not that God's made up of the legs, but he made that structure to focus his energy through a structure which is a man-like structure, and those legs of that structure are also damaged. So the light can't come out of the Netzach and the Hod. So in Purim, we rectify the Netzach, the right leg, so to speak, of the structure which God uses there. We call it the Tzelem Elokim, the image of God. It's God's image which he uses, right? Not that God's made up out of that image, but it's the one which he channels and he reveals himself to us, right? Because God's not made up of any parts, of course. See the second lecture on the channel for details. The left leg, which is corresponding to the Sephira of Hoid, which is subjugation, right? This idea of submission was rectified by Matisyahu and his 5 children. That's what the Arizal says. And this makes a lot of sense, because I think we mentioned this before. The idea of Purim is the idea we were victorious openly against Haman, right? So there's a positive, clear victory. So that's Netzach, the right leg, which corresponds to dominance. Whereas Chanukah, it wasn't so clear. It was a battle, we were weak, we just managed to survive and we pushed away, we could carry on serving God. But there wasn't a victory. The Greek Empire wasn't destroyed by the Jewish people there, right? The enemies of the Jewish people, yeah, they just left the land, right? They had enough, right? It was a much more subtle victory, one where the victory wasn't so euphoric as the Purim story. Right? It was subtle. They only realized that there's something special happened when they lit the menorah. Okay, fine, after 180 years of struggling against, finally these Greeks have gone, they've left the land, we were victorious in our guerrilla warfare, getting rid of them. Right, it's more of a relief, as opposed to the Purim story where it's 1 year of total panic and the euphoria at the end that we destroyed, oh wow, we thought we were going to be wiped out very quickly within a year, and then suddenly we're victorious over the enemies and the enemies got wiped out. Amazing. That's victory. That's clear victory. Hanukah wasn't like that. There was a very long time. It took about 180 years of the Greek exile. Right? Eventually, after many generations, you had Matzio and his children. They drove out the Greeks, and that's the rectification of Hoid, because Hoid is submission. We're going to speak about this idea a bit. We mentioned it before. It's the idea of where God, so to speak, submits to the evil in the world. He lets it run its course. I'm going to see why. But anyway, so that's the Sephira of Hoid. Hoid is the idea of submission, corresponds to the legs, the left leg specifically, the idea of submission, the idea of thanks, right? The legs of Jacob. Why the legs of Jacob? Right? How does it work with legs? Why has Hoid got anything to do with legs? And what was the idea of the angel injuring Jacob's legs? So we can understand this in terms of our body. We can look at Jacob's legs, and we can look at, so to speak, God's legs, right? As in the terms of the spheres of Netzach and Hoid. So let's start from the body. Let's start from us, right? So there's a rule in Kabbalah. Yes, one of the ways to understand the Kabbalistic ideas is look at the human body, because we're created as a sort of a facsimile, a physical version of a spiritual reality, which is the 10 spheres. our head, body, legs are all mapped onto that spiritual reality that makes mankind unique, because the structure of our whole being mimics that spiritual, conceptual, abstract reality, which is the 10 Sephiros in the spiritual dimension. So if we look at the way our body works, it can give us a hint how the Sephiros work. That's the idea. So what do legs do? When I want to function as a person, right? I have my ideas. But who am I? I'm my body, essentially. From the shoulders to the waist, the hips. That's who I am. Me. A person wants to point to themselves, they point here. Yeah, that's the center of you. I feel myself here. The autonomous self is here, right? Your thoughts, your mind is here. You and your mind are not strictly the same thing. There's different things going on there. Your mind is the one which can control you. It sounds a bit schizophrenic, but that's the human experience, yeah? On one hand, I want to do something, but then you think, is this the best thing to do, right? So you've got sort of like an advisor up here called the mind, and you're in control of that as well. So it's a bit weird, right? But I'm sure many of you watching are human beings, so I'm sure you've experienced what it's like to be a human, so we don't have to explain it too much, this idea. Right. Now, I have my ideals in my mind. I know what's good, I know what's bad, I know what's something to be desired, I know what's something to be shunned and to stay away from, I know what's good, I know what's dangerous. Then the body follows, hopefully, if the brain's worked properly, it follows the lead of the mind. And it says, okay, so I believe this is a valuable thing in life, this is a good thing, I'm going to try acting in a way which aligns with those ideals, which what my mind tells me. Right? And the body personifies that. The midas, the person feels excitement for those ideas, and it feels hatred or despises, and it feels aversion to negative ideas which go against the person's ethos. So if I want to carry out my ideals, I do it with my body, my arms. That's what my arms are. The arms are the limbs of action. You do things with your hands, primarily. You could do things with any part of your body, more or less. But it pales in comparison to the arms and the hands. The hands do everything which you do in life. Basically, almost everything can be traced down to the hands. They're essential for action. What are the legs for? If I want to create something, I've got a skill. I'm able to create things with my hands. Let's say I'm a sculptor or something like that. Yeah, so I can sit at home, I can sculpt things, I can make nice statues and whatever. Right, nice pottery. But I'm not able to show my skill in another place without going to another place. So if I want to express myself outside my immediate vicinity, what we call the daladhammas, the 4 cubits, which a person has control of his, the secular way to say is your personal space. If you want to go outside of your personal space and start influencing other people, you need to have tools to do that, right? So your tools to actually achieve things are the hands. The tools to express your power of creation, which is through the hands, in another place is going to be through the legs. The legs are the ones which can pick up you and put you in a place which is not your natural place, and you can start influencing other people, right? Or bringing out your ideas in another place. In fact, that's why the reproductive organ is in that part of the body, the lower part as well, because it represents going outside of yourself, either to a different place through the legs or a different time through a person's descendants, which are obviously from the reproductive organ. So these are different ways that a person can express himself outside of his immediate time and space. It's the idea of the future, right? It's the idea of going into a place which is not naturally your place. The place where I'm comfortable is here. The place where I'm uncomfortable, where that place sort of is antagonistic to me, right? That's over there. It's outside where my place is. It's someone else's place. And I've got a battle to overcome the resistance of the other place in order to be dominant in another place. That's the idea. It could be in terms of an aggressive way. I want to conquer a piece of land, or want to push someone out of their car or their house. I have to actually go to their house and go and push them out, right? Right? Or if I want to just teach people new ideas, they were absent. That place was dark in terms of the idea I want to teach them because they don't know it yet. When I go to that place, I teach them. I bring my light, i.e. my knowledge, or my creative ability, if we talk about the hands, and I bring it into that place where it was absent before. So I'm illuminating the darkness which is there. Right? That's a conceptual framework we're dealing with here. We've got the light, that means the positive thing, and you've got the darkness where the positive thing isn't there yet, and the legs carry me into that darkness, right? And let me express my light there. So what's going on with Jacob now? So when the angel affects Jacob's legs, what's really going on? They're fighting about reality. Reality, we said, that is the body, right? So this, the beginning of the night, they're struggling with each other. Jacob saying God's light will be dominant, right? Which is what Jacob represents in the world. Esau's angel is the Satan. Yeah, he represents no blockages. The separation of God from this world is going to dominate. We believe that we can take over reality and make it evil and use it for our own selfish desires. The battle eventually says that, no, reality ultimately is for good. That's why Jacob wins the fight. However, the angel injures Jacob where in the legs. Very nice, Jacob. You win the battle, but you're going to be injured. It's going to be hard for you to walk into this world of darkness. You want to bring the light of God, which is your realm, your comfort zone is God. You want to bring that into the world of darkness, which is the place where God is hidden. I'm going to make it harder for you. I'm not going to cut your legs off, right? Because you're going to do it eventually, but I'm going to make it hard for you. So I'm going to damage your legs. I'm going to damage your ability to bring the light into the darkness, to bring the knowledge of God into the physical world. That corresponds to God's midah of Netzach and Hod, right? God's got these two lower characteristics, which are the lenses, as we said before, through which God channels his energy directly into the physical world, the place where God is naturally not there, right? Where he's hidden, the physical world, the world of darkness, right? Of spiritual darkness. So the Netzach and the Hod are those two channels, with the Yesod as well, right? Three channels really, which take God's divine energy and brings it into the physical world. Right? Now, because of the damage to Jacob's legs, that caused a ripple effect, that there's a damage in the Netzach and Hod. That means when God's divine presence is open, right? That's the Chesed Gvurah Tiferet, that's the body itself, is open and expressing itself, they find that God can dominate over the world. Fine, everyone knows the temple in Jerusalem. Wow, God's knowledge is known to all mankind. There's prophecy in the world, right? You've got people who speak to God every day. But what happens when that light is taken away from the world, right? In the time of the temple, you had the three festivals, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, corresponding to Chesed, Gvurah, and Tiferet, kindness, justice, and mercy. Those three sephiros which correspond to the torso. But when the temple's destroyed or contaminated, right, you don't have that anymore. You can't express that. Right? There's a world of darkness we've gone into now. right? Especially in the exile where there's no temple at all. The Greeks succeeded in cutting out God's light from this world, right? So if you think about it, this fits very well with what we said before about how prophecy actually finished with the time of the Greeks. Rav Nisim Gaon, one of the very early commentators from about 1,000 odd years ago, he says that, in fact, the period of prophecy itself ended with the ascension of Alexander the Great and Greece. So it goes hand in hand. And we had a whole lecture about this, about the idea of a prophecy. I think that was last year's lecture, about the idea of prophecy and the Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral Torah, right? The way that the whole structure of reality changed drastically. Beforehand, we had prophecy, which is the idea that we were able to perceive a higher reality. I mean, God was shining his light to the world, right? Then the Greeks come along. We lose the desire for idolatry, but we also lose the ability for prophecy. So we lose that connection to something which is beyond us. So now, this is what the Greeks are good at. They say, we're the top of the world now. Instead of us being the correct version of who do we subjugate ourselves to, which is what the battles of different idolaters against the Jewish people were until that point. Jewish people said the only thing worth serving is God. And the idolaters said, no, serve that. Submit yourself to that. Submit yourself to this. Now there's a new battle, a new framework of the battle between good and evil appears now. You have on one hand, you've got the Jewish people, again, submit yourself to God, right? The Greeks said, don't submit yourself to anyone. We deny there's anything above us. We are the pinnacle of man, of creation itself, right? However they understood creation, right? We spoke about that another time, right? The idea of what God is, right? The idea of a God was really just a pathetic form of a superhuman, basically, but it wasn't a God as in something which you can't reach yourself. They're just big people, basically. That ends up with Christianity eventually, which is based ultimately philosophically on Greek thinking historically. Okay, so the Greeks are essentially the ones who say, we're in charge. We know the idea of copper. We spoke about copper. What's copper? The rabbis always refer to copper as the material which represents a certain aspect of brazenness and boldness. The idea of azus metzach, right? Azus metzach is the idea of the brazenness of the forehead. When you're brazen to someone, you go like that, yeah? Come on, you want to fight? Yeah. Yeah, you don't scare me. You try pushing out, you puff out your forehead when you do that. Your forehead represents this part of your face which is unmovable, right? The expression, sad, happy, it all happens with eyebrows and below. That's where the expression, that's where you see a certain flexibility in the face, right? Where it can react to stimuli coming from the inside or the outside. I want to express my happiness, or I'm reacting to someone doing something to me, fear, surprise, happiness, right? It's all reactive, this part of the face. This part of the face, there's no movement there, more or less. You can see, you crunch up the forehead a bit, but essentially this is the part of the head which is constant, right? It's expressions. So when you go like that, you're trying to show you're not affecting me. Yeah, you could try to scare me, I don't care. Holding up that's brazenness. That's connected with the idea of copper. I think one of the clothes of the priests represented copper somehow. Which one was it? No, it wasn't there. I'm getting confused with something else there. The Choshes, right. I can't remember exactly where. You have to forgive me. I'll have to look it up again. I know where to look it up. I can't remember the idea of copper is essentially it's a very hard metal, It's the idea of an unbending metal, right? So you've got copper pipes and things like that, yeah? In terms of reactivity, copper is a very unreactive metal. That's why it's used for pipes, right? Because it doesn't dissolve easily, right? But yet it's very hard, right? It's sturdy, unlike gold, which is very unreactive, but it's soft. So you've got the perfect balance with copper, something which doesn't react, but it also doesn't bend, right? So it's the perfect balance of the hard, immovable substance. That's the idea of the Greeks. The Greeks said that, no, we're in charge, we're not being influenced by anything, we are the influencers. So what happens? What's the opposite of someone who wants to dominate the whole time? You have to have people who are submissive. So where are the Greeks going to be the most successful in terms of concept against someone who is a submissive person? Or when talking about God, you're talking about his midah of hoid, his midah of submission. So the Greeks say, yeah, God, you're not in charge now, right? We're in charge, right? The first time that there was a rebellion against God directly, just rejecting God outright, that's the Greeks, right? As we said before, you had people who served idols. Yeah, of course there's God, but I'd rather serve the idol, right? But now the Greeks said, no, why should we serve anything? We're in charge. It's the idea of dominance, right? It's the idea where now the light of God doesn't even come into the world, even through corrupt ways, which would be idolatry. Now God's light is cut off from the world. What's that saying? That means God can't bring his light into a place where it naturally doesn't occur. It doesn't go from that chesed gvurot, from the torso aspect of God's attributes to the leg aspects of God's attributes. God's attributes being manifest and revealed in the physical world, in the world of darkness, the world of netzach and hoid, the legs. The Greeks destroy that, right? They damage God's legs. So therefore Purim and Chanukah are the two festivals where we succeed, we have victory in the darkness, under oppression. In the Purim story, we actually won the fight, but we was in exile. The Chanukah story, we kind of survived it, and we thrived afterwards, more or less, after the defeat of the Greeks. But still, it was not an open, clear, easy victory, so much so that God had to tell the Jewish people, you've actually done something really amazing here. I'm going to show you. Try lighting those candles and you'll see they're going to last for 8 days. Right? I'm telling you, you've done a miracle here. This war was not a natural war. You've done something supernatural now. As Arizal says, right? You've rectified the midah of Hod, because the Greeks were the one who were fighting against Hod. God's saying, okay, I'll submit. I'll let evil proliferate in the world. I'll let it. I'm going to show that I'm still in charge. I'm going to make the odds stack so much against in the favor of the Greeks and against the Jewish people, the ones who keep the Torah. Yeah, in fact, it's not against the non-Jews and Jews anymore. Even like a huge number of non-Jews of Jews are also on the Greek side. They became like Greeks, the Hellenists. So there's only going to be a handful of Torah scholars, people who still keep the commandments, and they're going to defeat. I'm going to make them, even the most unlikely candidates, I'm going to make them win the war. Right? Despite being the ones who naturally, or the submissive ones, the ones who don't fight, the ones who aren't good at winning wars, at dominating. Okay? So, the idea of Hod is the idea of subjugation, right? The essence of Hod is subjugation, right? It's the idea that I admit that you are in charge. So when we talk about God's characteristic of Hod, it's God saying, I admit you, I'm going to make it appear that you're in charge. Greeks, you want to dominate? 180 years, you be in charge. Right? The Greeks, with their brazen, bronze, copper, hard attitude, the attitude of dominating, right? The one of arrogance and brazenness and boldness, where we overpower people who we want them to submit to us, right? We'll take advantage of that. What does that mean in terms of God's light now? So that light, that lens of Hoid, which is meant, we're going to see what it's meant to do in a minute. This is what the Matisyo and his children rectified. But in the meantime, while the Greeks are still in charge, the middle of Hoid is blocked. That light's trying to come through. There's a blockage, right? And we know that in Kabbalistic thought, when the side of evil, whenever there's an aspect of evil in the world, it always gets its nourishment, its divine energy from when divine light is trying to come out, but there's a blockage. So it leeches off the blockage itself, right? So you can imagine if you've got like a tap of running water, yeah, very nice clean water, yeah, right? So maybe it's too powerful for a little insect to go and drink that water, it just get washed away by the water. But imagine you block up the tap, right, with a cloth, and you've got drops seeping out and everything. Now the flies or whatever, the insects, can go and rest on the cloth and start sucking the cloth itself to get the water it wants out from the cloth. That's the idea here, right? From the blockages, that's where the evil gets its power in this world. Matisyo and his children unblocked it. So now, whatever he did spiritually through the power of study of the Torah, right? They had that divine energy came in and gave them the ability to overpower the Greeks. That light got unblocked, and that resulted in a physical victory as well. In fact, the name of the Hashmonaim, the Hasmoneans, that was the name of the family, are called the Maccabees, right? The Maccabee, right? You had the Maccabee games. It's such a disaster, right? Because they call the Maccabee games based on Greek philosophy, the Greek idea of Greek sports, football, and winning. That's a very Greek idea. The Jewish idea is to be the best of yourself, to transcend and to be the best version of yourself possible. We don't care about beating other people. That's meaningless, because God created one person good at this and another person not so good, so obviously he's going to beat him. It's nothing to do with his effort at all, right? You haven't chosen to be there, you were just created like that. It's nothing to do with the free will, right? It's just given to you. So it's interesting, that's the idea of the oil. Why do we celebrate with oil? The Greeks, when they had their Olympics, they had a wreath of olive branches, right? Olive tree branches, right? As the wreath which they put on people's heads to represent the idea that you've risen to the top. Because we know that olive oil, you put olive oil on top of water, the oil rises to the top. That's why it's the idea. We've got to be very careful when you're frying. For those Jewish people out there who do a lot of frying over Chanukah, be very careful if you've got the frying pan there, right? And there's, God forbid, a fire. Don't pour water on it, because the water will sink to the bottom of the oil, right? And because the oil is very hot, it will boil the water very quickly, and the water will expand and just go like that, and it will push the oil which is now above it. So usually when you pour water on something, it will stay on top and it will just cool down the surface. But with oil, because oil rises, it's very low density, well, actually the water will actually push up the oil, right? So the idea of the olive oil, which we light the Chanukah candles with, is diametrically opposed to the olive wreaths which the Greeks put on the winners, right, of their Olympics. Because they believe in who is the best. I beat someone else, right? It's all about the winner, right? So that's rising to the top. The Jewish people also believe in rising to the top, but rising to the top, revealing the potential who you are. That means we're created with a body and a soul, and we want to fill that body up with as much of our soul as we can, and as much goodness and holiness as we can. That's the idea of the rising to the top from the Jewish perspective, right? That's the battle of the two oils, right? That's why the Ideally, you should light your Chanukah candles with olive oil if you can. Right, just on by the way there. Anyway, so the Maccabee games, right? Yeah, is the idea of beating other people. So it's really a bit of a sad irony there that they use the Maccabees, who are all against the idea of Greek sports, and they call it the Maccabee games. What can you do? You're going to see maybe there's a reason why God made it like that, right? The theme of the whole lecture, in fact. The idea of Maccabee is really, Maccabee is 4 letters. Mi, Chamocha, Bo'elim, Hashem. Maccabee. And the Yud at the end is actually God's name. Mi, Chamocha, Maccah, Bo'elim, Bi, Hashem. That's the year. Maccabee. The Talmud tells us that who is amongst, this is in chapter 15 in Exodus, the sea of the song of the sea, the splitting of the Red Sea. This is one of the verses there. Who is amongst you, who is like you, Bo'elim, amongst the powerful ones, God. Right? Out of all the powers in the world, there's nothing like you, God. The Talmud, actually using exegesis, reads it differently. You can read it like this: Mi chomocho be'ilmim Hashem, who is like you amongst the mute ones, God. A mute is a person who can't speak. Right? Why is it called? Why are we describing God as mute? Not very respectful. What's the idea here? We're referring to the midah of Hoid, who is like you, God, who you can keep silent despite the enemies of your people, killing them, subjugating them, but you still keep silent and you're still the one in control. Usually, if people are beating you, you have to fight back. God's so powerful, he can let the people do what they want and they still won't win. That's the ultimate level of control, right? If someone challenges me to a fight, yeah, and I go in full guns blazing, yeah, okay, I won, but it was a battle. If I say, yeah, I'll do it with one hand behind my back, that shows I'm so powerful, I don't even need to use all my power to beat you. I'm that much more dominant than you. I could do it with both my hands behind my back. I could do it blindfold. In fact, I can do it without even moving. In fact, you could do whatever you want against me, I'll still beat you. Right? So you can imagine someone just hitting it, and eventually the person runs out of energy, just collapses and dies because he's just worn himself out. He's used up all his energy trying to fit me, and I just prevail by just sheer, perseverance, right? And just a stoic persistence and just taking the hits. That's the ultimate level of dominance. That there's no way you can beat me. I don't even have to be proactive to beat you. Because if I would have to fight you, but what happens if I had a bad day and my arms weren't working properly? You could have beaten me, right? That's what people would think. So I'm going to make sure that people understand I'm so much more powerful than you that I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to keep completely silent. And we'll see, you're just going to lose anyway. That's God's attribute of Hoid. That's a real attribute of Hoid. The idea that God is recognizing and subjugating himself, so to speak, to the evil in the world. But through doing that and still being victorious, everyone will now admit to God and subjugate themselves to God's power. But really, yeah, God, you're the only power. Look, you literally let the powers of the forces of evil do everything they wanted. And they still failed. You're the ultimate power. There's no other power for you. You don't need to do anything. We see this reflected in the story of Titus, the one who destroyed the second temple. The Talmud says that he challenged God to a fight. And God said, I don't need to do much. I'll take my smallest insect in the world, just go up your nose, and it'll eat your brain out. 7 years it took till it completely made Titus go mad. Eventually he died from this insect, which was just in his brain, slowly eating away at it. Because I don't need to just drown you in a massive tsunami or tidal wave, whatever. Right? Like Titus said, God was going to do that first, right? And said, "Oh, so you can only defeat me by your water. Okay, wait till we get to dry land." God said, "Yeah, I'll do it on dry land. Get to dry land where you feel nice and secure, where you feel in your comfort zone. I'll destroy you there. Look, tiny little mosquito, up the nose, you're gone." 7 years later, right? God's showing His power by doing the minimum amount of effort. That's what Hod is. God does the minimum amount of, it's the channel which God brings the least amount of light out of, right? He shows, I'm not going to dominate you with my light. I'm going to make the light very faint. But the nature of Hod is that even the faintest amount of my light is enough to destroy anyone who wants to reject me. Okay? Okay. Now we understand why it's called an exile. Because all the exiles we were trying to get in the land of Israel with the temple, we have divine intervention. We have the divine spirit, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, especially through the temple. Right, we spoke about this many times, how special the temple was. People went in there, they came out repenting, they became new people just by the mere going into the temple, because it was such a holy place. That's all very good when the body's in charge. Well, you've got the body, you've got the three festivals corresponding to the two arms and the torso, right? But what happens if there's no temple, right? So we're in exile. We go out of the land. We're in exile now. We've lost our ability to be in contact. We're trying to grab onto God, so to speak. We get thrown away. I can't get you anymore, God. We're in exile. That's with the other three exiles. We're outside the land of Israel. We can't grab onto God, so to speak. The Greek exile is the same idea, but it works in a very different way. Instead of us being thrown out of the land of God, so to speak, with the Greek exile, it's God is thrown away from the land itself and is hidden. Right? That's it. We had a temple, but where's God? They contaminated it. They made it impure. They brought idolatry in. So we had the temple, but God's gone. They threw God away. How'd they do that? That's Greece. The idea of dominating, taking God. Yet you want to be in this world, God? We're going to stop you coming into this world. We're the ones in charge now. We're going to take your temple and dominate over it. We're not letting your legs come into the world, so to speak. The Netzach and Hod. Right? So when they're destroyed, that blockage of Hod, remember like the towels blocking up the tap, gets removed, the light comes out, and it's revealed that all along, you thought you were dominating of the Jewish people. All you were doing was bringing a new aspect of my dominance over the world. You were just revealing that I don't need to do any open miracles to control the world. That's what God was telling them. Right? I can't do that without the Greeks dominating. I need to let the Greeks dominate. I need to submit to whatever the Greeks want to do. Go to my temple. Go ahead. You're in charge. Do everything you can. Right? And at the end, everything's going to be revealed that you are powerless, despite the fact that I gave you every single chance to win. Because the midah of Hod is the midah which shows that God's in charge, despite the fact that He's not trying, despite the fact that He's seemingly submitting to everyone else. And by doing that, that's an ultimate form of us submitting to God, because there's no way to beat God now. Because God let people try to defeat Him, and then it didn't work. That's the idea of Gilu Yichud, which we spoke about the third lecture on the channel. A very important lecture. The ultimate purpose of creation itself is to reveal God through the darkness. That's why it's the lower Sephiros. Yeah, you start off with the ideals, Chocham Bin Das, then you go into kindness, justice, balance, mercy. Those are the primary ways God wants to relate to us, but that's in heaven, so to speak. But then He has to transfer it into the world of darkness. What's He going to do? God had to create a world where there was free will, which means God had to hide his presence from the world. So therefore, what connection does God have with the world? It's through the legs, through the Netzachod and the Yesod, right? The three lower Sephiros. But God still has to let there be free will, despite the fact that he's got, so to speak, his legs in this world, where he can walk in a place which is naturally not his place. Right? The place where he decides himself to be absent from. At least on the surface. He's absent. The secret is he's there, but it's all hidden. That's why the miracles of Purim and Chanukah were much more of a hidden miracle. Even though the lighting of the candles of the menorah was an open miracle, but it was an open miracle which comes through the darkness. It's not an open like 10 plagues or God speaking from the heavens giving the Torah. It wasn't an open miracle. We're teaching the world how to experience God. Beautiful idea here. The idea of Persumei Nisa. Persumei Nisa, there's two festivals where we've got a commandment to Persumei Nisa, to publicize the miracle. That's Purim and Chanukah. Right? You don't need to publicize the giving of the Torah or the going out of Egypt. That was self-apparent. That's just open miracles. Right? But a natural political event like the Purim story, or a war, a guerrilla warfare, right? With a miracle at the end, with the menorah, indeed. But the actual events themselves could be explained rationally through, political, serendipity, or the fact that clever tactics in the guerrilla warfare could explain it, right? So they're not open miracles. Our job is to see that God, even in the world of nature where God's hidden, go back to the video we gave about nature versus miracles for background on this idea. Even in the world of nature where God hides himself, we realize that everything is essentially a hidden miracle. There's no such thing as nature in itself. It's just a miracle happening over and over again in a pattern. God's constantly involved in this world. You have to go to that video though. I can't go into it here again. That's too big of a topic. But that's the general idea. So, when it comes to Purim and Chanukah, these are festivals where God's naturally hidden. He's in nature. He's working through nature. Yeah? My realm is the body, right? So to speak, using them as a analogy, obviously, right? Because remember, our body is an analogy for the way that God uses his different powers, right? My realm is a place where I'm revealed, where the light is real, because that's reality. God's light is reality. There's a place which is outside of my place. It's called this world, the physical world of darkness, where I'm not apparent, but I'm going to put my feet into it. My feet meaning Netzach and Hod. I'm going to walk into the world of darkness. Ha'oretz hadom raglo, it says in the beginning of chapter 66 in Isaiah. Hashamayim kisi, my throne is in the heavens. Ha'oretz hadom raglo, the land is hadom raglo, is my footstool. You see an allusion to this idea of the feet being connected with how God connects and expresses himself in the world, in the physical world. In the world of nature, I'm going to reveal that I'm here without having to do an open miracle. If I do an open miracle, that'll defeat the whole purpose. It has to be a hidden miracle. And the goal is the Jewish people understand, God's in charge of nature itself. God's manipulating political events. That's natural. But he's doing it in a way where it's very unlikely to happen. In fact, statistically, it might be impossible to happen for too many convergences of fortunate events, right? Like Esther becoming the queen, right? And the Vashti getting killed in the first place, right? Haman building the gallows and coming to ask Achashverosh exactly the wrong time. Just when Achashverosh is trying to reward Mordechai, Haman comes to tell him to destroy Mordechai. Right, so all the confluence of events works perfectly, right? Of natural events. That's why God's hidden in the Megillah. Megillah's Esther. It's Megala the Hester. It's revealing the Esther, the hiddenness. Chanukah is the same idea, it's just done in a different way. It's the left leg. It's the more passive, the more submissive leg. Our job is, by lighting the Chanukah candles, to do Persumei Nisa, to publicize the miracle. Right? Because you don't need to publicize a miracle of the 10 plagues. If you just read the history books, it's obvious. You read the history books about the Greek exile and the battle of the Hasmoneans against the Greeks. I don't see a miracle there. It's very lucky, very fortunate events. Yeah. No, God is behind everything. God is the one manipulating everything in the darkness, within nature. He's using nature itself. Nature itself is just God acting in a way where he doesn't reveal himself openly. That's the legs. He's going in a place which is not his, but he's there. The legs are there. They're influencing events. So therefore we've got a commandment to reveal the hidden miracle. The Ramban, Nachmanides, says at the end of Parshas Boy, just after the 10 plagues, in chapter 13, the end of chapter 13 in Exodus, Nachmanides says a long famous piece that the whole idea of Judaism is to reveal that God's the one in charge, right? And through the revealed miracles, we understand that even nature itself is just hidden miracles, right? That's the job of the Jew, yeah? And God gives us open miracles to make us realize God's the one in charge. Nature is secondary, is what's the word? Is subordinate to God. So therefore, when something happens in nature, we understand really it's God who's doing it. From the open miracles, we can see from the revealed miracles, we can understand that the hidden miracles of nature. So what we're doing on Chanukah, we're showing we've experienced a hidden miracle. So what we do is we want to go backwards now. We want to show through this hidden miracle. We're saying, you think it was natural? This was a miracle. We have to publicize the miracle. We have to take something which was hidden and reveal it. That's the idea of revealing the light of the legs, revealing the light of God is in charge of nature. This is the ultimate form of revelation of God. You're doing that purpose of what the Jew's job in the world is to reveal God's all-powerful in the world of nature. We reveal that. We are doing the revealing, and we do that by lighting the candles. Lighting those candles, illuminating the darkness. Representing the lights of the menorah, which they lit with miraculous, the oil, right? The idea which we've spoken about, taking the oil, the holiness of the Heichel, the place where God's presence is, but God's divine presence wasn't there in the second temple. Even so, we still saw the miracles. God was telling them, I want you to make a festival. Yeah, you didn't just win a war, right? You won a war in a way where it was supernatural, but it was completely hidden. But I have to tell you, that war is a hidden miracle. I've got to give you a revealed miracle to make you realize that now you've got the power to reveal me, despite the fact that I'm gone from the world, so to speak. Why is God gone from the world? Of course he's here. But why is he not visible in the world? Because the Greeks, their whole impurity was to stop prophecy coming from the world. It's interesting that in a Kabbalistic thought, Netzach and Hod are the two Sephiros of prophecy. Right? The prophets correspond to Netzach and Hod. So when the Greeks come along, they take over Netzach and Hod. Right? They say, we're in charge, no more prophecy. We've got the other force, the negative force in the world is in charge. So what happens is we defeat the Greeks, right? By showing that even in the world of darkness, we don't need prophecy anymore, right? You think the only way the Jewish people can survive is if we're on the land and God's communicating with us. We don't have to be on the land. We can even be thrown out the land, as it was in the time of the Romans, just 200 years later, right? And we don't even need prophecy to be connected with God, because we can see God in nature. The miraculous way that God supports and protects and sustains and makes the Jewish people thrive throughout the last 2,000 years. Natural history, no open miracles, but yet somehow the biggest miracle of in the world is a hidden miracle. How have the Jewish people survived for 2,000 years and thrived despite everything being thrown against us? People trying to influence, to abandon the religion, people trying to kill us physically. Doesn't matter. The Jewish people still persist. How? As we mentioned before, the Duke or something said to, was it Napoleon or, yeah, he said the biggest miracle of creation are the Jews themselves, the fact that they survived. So this is the message of Chanukah. Even in the darkest of times, God's still in charge. Now we can explain the questions we had earlier. Why do we speak about the celebration of the miracles and God's kindness? Thank you, God, you gave us back the temple. We're able to purify the temple. We're able to do that open miracle of lighting candles. And we were able to institute a Yom Tov, a festival. How's that possible? You can only... festivals only come from the Bible, biblically ordained, or sometimes even through prophets can institute a rabbinic festival like Purim, because there were prophets at that time. Where do you see the idea that rabbis who don't have any direct prophecy, no direct revelation from God, how can they make a festival? God was telling them, look at those candles. These candles are going to awaken something in you to make you realize that I want you to make a festival despite the fact that you're not prophets. That itself is a miracle. That's God's direct divine intervention. God saying, make a festival even though you're not prophets anymore. So we're thanking God not just for the miracles, we're thanking God for the ability of us through our own efforts. See last year's lecture. Right? Through our own efforts to reveal Torah in the world, to reveal God's light in the world through our own physical efforts, our own intellect, our hard work. We do everything the Greeks do, so to speak. We just work, we work things out, we use our physical, rational mind, but somehow that connects us, it helps us transcend, and we get a type of a prophecy which comes through our own minds, which is coming from within us, as opposed to coming from above. Right? That's the idea of the Chacham Odef Minovi, the idea that the wise person is greater than a prophet. It comes through him. It's us ourselves who are the channels of God's light now. Right? Despite being in total spiritual darkness, we still have access to the spiritual realms. So much so that we can reveal a light that's only normally accessible through prophecy. That fits beautifully with what the Talmud, when the Talmud speaks about that we make blessings when we do the lighting, right? We make praise God, blessing, right? The first blessing is, blessed are you, God, our God, the King of the universe, Asher Kedishon v'mitzvot, who sanctified us with His commandments, and He commanded us, Ladlik ner shel Chanukah, to light the candle of Chanukah. But the Gemara, the Talmud asks the question. This is in 23a in Tractate Shabbos. God didn't command us to light the candles, the rabbis commanded us. Right? So the Talmud answers, because there's a commandment in the Torah to listen to the rabbis. Right? As it says, "Lo sasum in hadavashim if you've got any doubts or anything, don't turn from anything they say, right or left. If they tell you to do this, you follow it. The power of the sages. Obviously, we talk about established sages, and there's lots of conditions behind that. But once we establish these are genuine Torah sages, they have the power to say things which, on the surface, you might not understand, right? As long as it's not obviously wrong, right? If they tell you to do something wrong, then they're not a sage anymore, right? If they tell you to break the Sabbath or whatever without any rationale behind it, like someone's life is in danger, okay, in this case, break the Sabbath just for this time. That's okay. But if they say, oh, you don't have to keep the Sabbath anymore, obviously they're heretical, they're not sages anymore. Yeah, but we're talking about genuine sages where we don't have any reason to believe that they're saying something new, which is going against the Torah. This is the mitzvah, Asher Tzivonu V'Tzivonu, because in the final stretch of Jewish history, the last 2,500 years, more or less, which will last until the Mashiach comes, the Messiah, we're going to be in this bitter exile, right? And we won't have clear revelation from God. We'll have holy people dotted throughout the generations to keep us going, to guide us. But essentially we're in the darkness. How do we access God? Through the Torah, through study of the Torah, which the Greeks wanted to stop. That's one of the 4 things we explained the Greeks tried to stop. Through the sages, right? Through Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, the ability to bring out the Torah through our own human efforts and endeavors, taking that intellect which Yovam brought to the world, instead of functioning as a submissive being, just submitting what's God telling us, or maybe what's this idol telling us, oh, I should really listen to God. We function in a different way now. Now we have to be proactive. We don't wait for God's divine intervention or revelation. You can't work out truth through revelation now. Revelation is very unreliable. You get hallucinations, got wishful thinking, right? Only through prophecy, where you get an absolute beyond any doubt possible, of the truth of the prophecy. That's what prophets were. They knew 100% clarity. Not what people say, oh, I'm 100% sure. What do you see? You saw a hallucination. That could have been an hallucination. Well, it's very convincing. No, but it could have just been a hallucination. Have you ever taken drugs before? Well, yeah, okay, but you had a dream before. Yeah, fine, okay, fine. Yeah, so that's what you were experiencing, possibly. Yeah, but 99% I'm sure it was real. Okay, but it's only 99%. With prophecy, for some reason, we don't have this, unfortunately, today. Prophecy, person's 100% certain of what he's seeing and is perceiving. It's a reality which we don't really have now. But now we have the ability in the world of the darkness to access God through our own human efforts, through our intellect, through our deep understanding of the world, through rigorous analysis, the thinking, and through that effort, God opens our minds to help us understand truth. Which the Greeks would say, well, you're just very clever. So no, you don't understand. I'm a stupid person. There's no way naturally I could have understood this idea. Right? God opened my mind because I put the effort in. And that extends to people who are very clever. They understand ideas which are really hard to understand, how they could understand these deep ideas. Right? You're taking the intellect of Yovan, the idea of we are proactive in our deciding how we're going to lead our lives, as opposed to passively. And the amazing thing is, we're taking precisely that dark philosophy of the Greeks, and we're using that to reveal God in the world. The ultimate Gilu Yichud, the ultimate revelation that God's in charge. God says, I'm going to sit back here, let the Greeks dominate over the world. Show the world your false way of acting, your false philosophy that the human mind is all powerful. Right? Teach it. The Jewish people pick up on that. Okay. Well, let's try that. Let's try just getting to try and understand reality just through our human mind. Thank you, Greeks, for this instructive methodology. And the Jewish people now reach God through what was previously the Greek way of thinking. We use our analysis, our logic, our reasoning, and through that we reach God. The ultimate form of revelation that God's in charge. He didn't just let the Greeks attempt to beat him. He was using the Greeks the whole way along to reveal his light of Hod, which is the Jewish people understanding God through the darkness, through their minds, without having to have revelation. It's beautiful. The irony is just perfect. I hope you understand that last bit. It's really beautiful. Now we understand why Chanukah is, on one hand, it's the festival of light, and also the festival of darkness. Right? It's the light which shines specifically through the darkness. Right? It's not just a festival of light. Light, very nice. Light, bright, God's revealed. But no, you're missing the point of Chanukah. It's the darkness which illuminates. We see through the darkness God's light. It's the darkness itself which shows us the light. The Greeks are the ones who reveal this way of accessing God. They're the ones who cut prophecy out of the world. They're the ones who leave the world dark and distant from God. Yeah. So now we can do the ultimate revelation of God, which is revealing God despite the fact that He's not revealed. Showing that God is all-powerful, even though He's not revealing Himself. He's there behind the scenes. So therefore there's no other possibility now. Every situation possible which you can concoct in your imagination, God's going to be in charge. Alright, so could we beat God when there's a temple? No, you can't. We've tried that, done that. Right? Or maybe if the enemies of God think like this, maybe if we destroy the temple, exile the Jews from the land, subjugate the Jews, actually kills a lot of them, the ones who are still persisting, still alive, let's convert them to our religions, do everything we can to beat them. Maybe there we can cut God out of the world permanently. It won't work. That's the lesson of Chanukah. It can't work, because that's been tried, it's been done, it's been revealed that God is there despite the fact that there's complete darkness. And in fact, those people who try to cut God out of the picture, they're just helping God reveal a much deeper level of control. Because the bigger your opponent, and you still just sit down with your hands behind your back, not even punching him, you take the most powerful person, and you still beat him by doing nothing. So the more powerful he is, the more you've revealed your power. That's what Chanukah is. The ultimate nation which has the supreme intellect which we've had over the last few thousand years. You can't beat the Greek intellect. Yeah, what we have nowadays is more advanced than the Greeks because we're like dwarfs standing on giant shoulders, right? But the Greeks were the ones who had immense intellectual powers, the philosophy, the science. By doing that, we're showing that God's light is ultimately to be found in all situations, however dark. Maybe that can be a consolation for us in a small way, even the terrifying and ugly head of senseless terror and seemingly random killing. Where's God? The famous quote, where was God in the Holocaust? Where was He on October the 7th? Where was He in Australia just a couple of days ago now? Right? This random killing. Well, where's God? What are you doing, God? Why are you letting this happen? The most happiest festival, the last festival of the Jewish people, Chanukah. It's the last festival which we ever got. Since then, there hasn't been a new festival. Right? Right? This is the festival of the darkness. Chanukah teaches us that despite the fact that there's darkness, despite the fact that you're still in exile, I'm here. That is the message of Chanukah. I haven't left the scene at all, God says. We don't understand what that means yet. But if we understood what it meant, if we'd see, I understand why, unfortunately, it's heartbreaking. Try not to get too emotional. Despite the fact that we see these people being massacred, right? If we understand, but I can see God's plan, it's okay. That would be God being revealing. That would be God revealing himself. I'm telling you why this person, that person, etc. God's not telling us. It has to be hidden. It has to be a way where we don't yet understand. That is the message of Chanukah. Look at the world. Things are going disastrous. Everything's falling apart. Right? See the Jews being persecuted. We've seen this pattern before. It's scary. Is God going to save us despite these terrible things happening? The message of Chanukah is somehow, even though we don't understand, God is crafting through the darkness and the suffering itself. He's crafting our salvation. It's hard to say, but I don't want to say it. It doesn't sound nice, but all the tragedies, I speak generally, all the tragedies which happen to the Jewish people, they're all for the best. Somehow. There's no way we can understand that. By definition, it's darkness. It's meant to be darkness. It's meant to be impossible to understand. Somehow God's got his massive overall plan. The grandmaster chess player who's thinking 1,000 moves ahead. This is essential for the final plan to come. More darkness means a higher level of revelation in the end. We don't understand how that's going to play out, but ultimately the perfection of the world is going to come out through these dark events. Yeah, and eventually that will be revealed to us eventually in the time of the Mashiach coming. Please, very soon in that day, where God doesn't need to hide anymore. Where we've done the fixing, we've unblocked all the blockages, right? And now the light can just shine and come forth and reveal itself. So when we see the world descending into darkness, we shouldn't lose hope. This is all part of God's plan to elevate us, to let us reveal through our trust in him. And despite the darkness and the tragedy, that we have an unbreakable dedication and trust and faith in him. And by doing that, we reveal that, we reveal that we truly believe that God is totally in control. And through our free will, we reveal that reality. God is totally in control. It's a test of faith, this. That is the message of Chanukah. Are we able to light those lights of Chanukah while the darkness is so dark? So that's the message of Chanukah. And hopefully we'll be consoled in a more open way very soon with the coming of the Mashiach. And this is why I believe that maybe, possibly, who knows, it's hidden after all. Maybe I'm accessing the light through my rigorous thought. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe that's why God, the very first point of Chanukah in the whole world, that's when this massacre happened. He's telling us disasters will happen, but the message of Chanukah is still there. We're still lighting the Chanukah candles to remember the original miracle, which is that God is there in the darkest of darknesses. Okay, so I wish everyone a happy, enlightening Chanukah, where we're able to see, despite anything going wrong in the world, we'll be able to stay strong and experience God's light, which is a very, very special holy time of Chanukah, where we actually, looking at the candles, we start to get a glimpse of what that light in darkness is. Thanks for listening.